Imagine this. It's a beautiful Saturday morning in Wellington, Florida. The sun is shining, birds are chirping, and a woman named Marlene Warren is enjoying a quiet breakfast with her son. Suddenly, there's a knock at the door. When she opens it, she's greeted by a clown. Not just any clown, but one holding 2 festive balloons and a bouquet of flowers. But this isn't a friendly birthday surprise. This clown is holding something else. A gun. And, in a horrifying instant, the clown fires, ending Marlene's life right on her doorstep. This is the chilling true story of the killer clown. The date was May 26, 1990. Marlene Warren, a 40-year-old mother and successful business owner, seemed to have it all. She managed several rental properties and a used car dealership with her husband, Michael Warren. They lived in a wealthy equestrian community, a picturesque neighborhood known for its polo matches and lavish homes. From the outside, their life looked like a dream. But behind the perfectly manicured lawns and smiling family photos, a dark and complicated reality was brewing. The police arrived at a chaotic scene. Marlene's son, Joey, who was only 22 at the time, had witnessed the whole thing. He described the clown in detail, wearing a bright orange wig, a red bulb nose, and a painted-on smile, carrying 2 balloons, one saying, "You're the greatest," and another with a picture of Snow White. The clown calmly handed her the flowers and balloons, then pulled out a pistol and shot her in the face. Before fleeing, the clown simply walked away and got into a white Chrysler LeBaron, disappearing without a trace. Investigators were baffled. Who would commit such a bizarre and brazen murder in broad daylight? The disguise was almost too perfect, making it nearly impossible to identify the assailant. Was it a man? A woman? They had no idea. The community was in shock, gripped by fear and speculation. The story of the killer clown made headlines across the country, turning a private tragedy into a national sensation. The investigation immediately focused on Marlene's personal life. Detectives quickly learned that the Warrens' marriage was far from perfect. Friends and family told them that Marlene was unhappy and had even told some people she was afraid of her husband, Michael. She was planning to leave him, which would have had significant financial consequences for Michael. According to Florida law at the time, if she left him, she could have claimed half of their extensive business assets. This provided a powerful motive. As they dug deeper into Michael Warren's life, they uncovered a string of affairs. And one name kept coming up: Sheila Keene. Sheila worked for Michael, repossessing cars for his dealership. Their relationship was an open secret. Multiple witnesses reported seeing them together, and employees said their affair was obvious. Sheila was also married, but she and Michael were reportedly deeply involved. Detectives discovered that just 2 days before the murder, Sheila had gone to a local costume shop and bought a clown costume, an orange wig, and white face makeup. The store clerks remembered her. Even more damning, a local Publix grocery store had an employee who sold flowers and balloons to a woman matching Sheila's description just an hour and a half before Marlene was killed. The woman specifically requested the same 2 balloons found at the crime scene. The evidence was piling up, and it all pointed to Sheila Keene. The getaway car. The white Chrysler LeBaron was found abandoned a few days later in a nearby parking lot. Inside, police found orange fibers that looked like they came from a wig, and strands of long, brown hair. At the time, DNA technology was still in its early stages. They could tell the hair didn't belong to Michael Warren, but they couldn't definitively link it to Sheila Keene. The case was strong, but it was all circumstantial. There was no murder weapon, no confession, and not enough physical evidence to guarantee a conviction. The investigation stalled. For years, the case went cold. Michael Warren continued to run his businesses, and Sheila Keene eventually disappeared from the public eye. The mystery of the killer clown became one of Florida's most infamous unsolved crimes. Marlene's family was left without justice, haunted by the brutal and theatrical nature of her death. Her son, Joey, had to live with the memory of watching his mother die at the hands of a smiling clown. But technology doesn't stand still. Fast forward 24 years to 2014. The Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office decided to reopen the case. With advancements in DNA testing, they hoped to finally find the answers that had eluded them for so long. They retested the evidence found in the getaway car, specifically the strands of brown hair. This time, the results were conclusive. The DNA from the hair was a perfect match to Sheila Keene. Investigators also discovered something else that had happened in the years since the murder. Michael Warren and Sheila Keene had gotten married in 2002. They were living together in Tennessee under new names, running a restaurant called the Purple Cow. They had literally run away and started a new life together, leaving a trail of suspicion and a cold case behind them. The puzzle pieces finally fit. The motive, the means, the opportunity, it all pointed to a plot hatched by the two lovers to get Marlene out of the picture. In 2017, 27 years after Marlene was murdered, Sheila Keene Warren was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The woman who had allegedly hidden behind a clown mask to commit a cold-blooded killing was finally facing justice. Michael Warren was never charged in connection with the murder itself, though he faced other legal troubles related to their business dealings over the years. The arrest brought a sense of closure to Marlene's family, but the long and winding road to justice was far from over. The legal proceedings dragged on for years. Sheila Keene Warren maintained her innocence. Her defense attorneys argued that the evidence was too old, that witnesses' memories had faded, and that the original investigation was flawed. But the prosecution had the new DNA evidence, the testimony from the costume and flower shops, and the clear motive of a love affair that turned deadly. Finally, in 2023, just before her trial was set to begin, Sheila Keene Warren made a surprising move. She pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of second-degree murder. This plea allowed her to avoid a potential life sentence if convicted of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to 12 years in prison. For the family of Marlene Warren, it was a bittersweet victory. Justice had been served, but it had taken over 3 decades. The story of the killer clown is a chilling reminder of how secrets and lies can fester beneath the surface of a seemingly perfect life. It's a tale of love, betrayal, and a murder so bizarre it sounds like something out of a horror movie. But for the Warren family, it was a very real nightmare. The image of a smiling clown, a symbol of joy and laughter, was forever twisted into a symbol of terror and tragedy. What do you think? Was the sentence fair after all these years? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Imagine it's a quiet evening in late 1968. A young couple is out on their first date, parked on a lonely lover's lane. Suddenly, another car pulls up, and a man emerges, gun in hand. What happens next is the beginning of one of America's most terrifying and enduring true crime mysteries. This is the story of the Zodiac Killer. The first confirmed attack occurred on December 20th, 1968, in Benicia, California. High school students Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday were shot and killed. Initially, it seemed like a random, tragic act of violence. But 7 months later, the horror escalated. On July 4th, 1969, another couple, Darlene Farron and Michael Mago, were shot in their car in a park in Vallejo. Darlene died, but Michael miraculously survived, providing the first description of the attacker, a heavy-set white male. The very next day, the killer himself made a phone call to the Vallejo Police Department. In a calm, monotone voice, he claimed responsibility for both attacks. This was the first time the world heard from the man who would soon call himself the Zodiac. He wanted more than just to kill. He wanted fame. He wanted to instill fear. And he wanted to play a game with the authorities and the public. Less than a month later, 3 major newspapers in the San Francisco Bay Area, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times Herald-Each, received a handwritten letter. The letters contained details about the murders that only the killer could know, proving their authenticity. But they also contained something else, something that would become the killer's signature: a bizarre, 3-part cryptogram. The writer demanded that the newspapers publish his coded message on their front pages. If they refused, he threatened to go on a killing rampage that weekend. At the bottom of the letter, he signed off with a crossed circle symbol, a mark that would soon become synonymous with terror. The newspapers complied, and the race to crack the code began. The public was both horrified and fascinated. Who was this person, so brazen and intelligent? Just 1 week later, a high school teacher from Salinas, Donald Harden, and his wife Betty, cracked the 408-symbol cipher. The message was chilling and grammatically strange. It read, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest, because man is the most dangerous animal of all." He went on to say that he was collecting slaves for the afterlife. And at the end of the decoded message, he revealed something terrifying. His identity was hidden within the cipher. But it wasn't. It was another one of his cruel games. On September 27, 1969, the Zodiac struck again. This time in broad daylight at Lake Berry. College students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were relaxing by the water when they were approached by a man wearing an incredibly bizarre and frightening executioner-style hood with the Zodiac symbol stitched on the front. He tied them up before brutally stabbing them, leaving Cecilia to die from her injuries. Brian survived, despite being stabbed multiple times in the back. Before leaving, the killer walked over to Brian's car and drew his crossed circle symbol on the door, along with the dates of his previous attacks. He then drove to a payphone and once again called the police, calmly reporting a double murder and describing his location. Just 2 weeks later, the Zodiac's reign of terror moved into the heart of San Francisco. On October 11, 1969, taxi driver Paul Stein picked up a passenger at the intersection of Washington and Cherry Streets. The passenger shot Stein in the head, killing him instantly. The killer then took Stein's wallet and a piece of his blood-soaked shirt. This murder was different. It was in a busy urban area, and there were witnesses. Teenagers across the street saw the man and called the police, describing a white male in his late 20s or early 30s. What happened next is one of the most frustrating moments in the entire investigation. The police dispatcher mistakenly reported the suspect as a black male. So, when 2 officers passed a white man walking away from the scene just minutes later, they didn't stop him. This man was almost certainly the Zodiac killer, and he simply walked away into the night. Days later, the San Francisco Chronicle received another letter. Inside was a piece of Paul Stein's bloody shirt, undeniable proof that the letter was from the killer. In this letter, the Zodiac taunted the police for their incompetence, gloating about how they had stopped and spoken with him. He also made his most infamous threat. He claimed he was going to attack a school bus full of children. "School children make nice targets," he wrote. "I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning." This threat sent a wave of panic across the Bay Area. Police escorts followed school buses, and parents lived in constant fear. The Zodiac had achieved his goal. He was terrorizing an entire region. He continued to send letters and ciphers to the press for years. One card sent on Halloween in 1970 included a new cipher, the Z340, which would remain unsolved for over 50 years. He claimed to have committed many more murders, up to 37, though investigators could only officially link him to 7 victims, 5 of whom died. The letters were filled with ego, misspellings, and threats. He played with investigators, giving them clues that led nowhere. He sent a bomb diagram, threatening to blow up a bus. He mocked the police assigned to his case. The main investigators, Dave Toschi and Bill Armstrong of the San Francisco Police Department, worked tirelessly, chasing down thousands of leads. The primary suspect for many years was Arthur Lee Allen, a former schoolteacher with a checkered past. He was interviewed by police, had a watch with the Zodiac brand, and owned the same type of boots that left prints at the Lake Berryessa crime scene. Friends even claimed he had confessed to them. However, his fingerprints didn't match the one partial print found. His DNA didn't match the sample from the back of a stamp, and his handwriting was not a conclusive match to the Zodiac's letters. Despite mountains of circumstantial evidence, nothing could definitively tie him to the crimes. Allen died in 1992, taking any secrets he might have had to his grave. Over the decades, countless other suspects have been named by amateur and professional sleuths. The case has become a cultural obsession, spawning books, movies, and a whole community of online detectives. Everyone has a theory. Was it a group of people? Was it a member of law enforcement? The possibilities seemed endless. Then, in December 2020, a breakthrough. A team of code breakers from the United States, Australia, and Belgium finally cracked the infamous Z340 cipher after 51 years. The message was just as disturbing as the first. It read, "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner because I now have enough slaves to work for me." The reference to a TV show was about a call-in to a morning talk show where someone claiming to be the Zodiac spoke on air. The killer was disavowing that call. But once again, the cipher contained no name, no identity. It was just more taunting from beyond the grave. Today, the Zodiac case officially remains open in several jurisdictions. While many investigators believe the killer is likely long dead, the mystery endures. He was a killer who used the media as his stage, creating a persona that was as terrifying as his crimes. He left a trail of ciphers, clues, and confusion, but never his name. The face of the hooded man at Lake Berryessa, the calm voice on the phone, the crossed circle symbol, they are all fragments of a ghost who haunted Northern California and has haunted the American imagination ever since. The Zodiac killer committed his last confirmed murder over 50 years ago, yet the question still lingers. Who was he? Picture this. It's the dead of night. You're asleep in your bed, in your own home, a place that's supposed to be your sanctuary. Suddenly, a blinding flashlight beam slices through the darkness, pinning you to your mattress. A masked figure is standing in your room. This wasn't a scene from a horror movie. This was the terrifying reality for countless people in California during the 1970s and 80s. A phantom-like predator was on the loose, and his reign of terror would last for over a decade, leaving a trail of devastation that baffled law enforcement and petrified an entire state. He was known by many names: the Visalia Ransacker, the East Area Rapist, the original Night Stalker, but today, the world knows him by one chilling moniker: the Golden State Killer. The story begins in the early 1970s, not with murder, but with a series of peculiar and unsettling burglaries in Visalia, a small city in California's agricultural heartland. A prowler, dubbed the Visalia Ransacker, was breaking into homes. But he wasn't just stealing valuables. He would meticulously rifle through personal belongings, scatter underwear, and sometimes just move items around, seemingly to let the homeowners know he had been there. It was a bizarre display of dominance, a psychological game. But on September 11, 1975, the game turned deadly. Claude Snelling, a journalism professor, woke up to find a masked man attempting to kidnap his teenage daughter from her bed. Snelling confronted the intruder, who shot him twice before fleeing into the night. Claude Snelling died, becoming the first known murder victim of this elusive criminal. The Visalia Ransacker vanished, but the violence was just beginning. A year later, in the summer of 1976, the terror resurfaced about 200 miles north, in the suburbs of Sacramento County. A man began breaking into homes at night, targeting single women or couples. He would subdue them, often using shoelaces he found in the house to tie them up. He would then spend hours in their homes, ransacking the place, eating their food, and committing horrific assaults. The press named him the East Area Rapist. His methods were chillingly methodical. He would often call his victims beforehand, sometimes breathing heavily into the phone, other times whispering threats. He would study their routines, learn the layout of their homes, and even unlock windows or doors days in advance to ensure an easy entry. He moved like a ghost, his face always hidden behind a ski mask, his presence a paralyzing force of fear. For 2.5 years, he terrorized community after community across Sacramento, Contra Costa, and other Northern California counties, leaving a wake of trauma, but, at this stage, no more fatalities. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared in Northern California, he vanished again in 1979. A collective sigh of relief was breathed, but it was tragically premature. The predator had simply moved south. In October 1979, in Goleta, a quiet coastal town in Santa Barbara County, the pattern changed from assault to murder. Dr. Robert Offerman and his girlfriend, Dr. Deborah Manning, were found shot to death in their condo. The scene bore the chilling hallmarks of the East Area Rapist, the bindings, the ransacking, but with a brutal escalation. The press and public didn't immediately connect the crimes. This new killer was dubbed the original Night Stalker. He continued his murderous spree across Southern California, from Ventura to Orange County. His victims were couples, attacked in the sanctity of their own bedrooms. The attacks were savage and brutal. In March 1980, Lyman and Charlene Smith were bludgeoned to death in their Ventura home. The killer used a fireplace log. In August 1980, Keith and Patrice Harrington met the same fate in their Dana Point home. In February 1981, Manuela Withen was murdered in Irvine, while her husband lay tied up and helpless. The killer's cruelty knew no bounds. He would sometimes stay for hours, a tormenting presence in the home long after his victims were gone. The fear that gripped Southern California was palpable. People bought guns, installed elaborate security systems, and slept in shifts. Yet the killer remained a phantom, always one step ahead. The final known murder occurred in May 1986. Janelle Cruz, an 18-year-old woman living alone for the first time in her family's Irvine home, was found murdered. After this, the attacks stopped. The Golden State Killer, after a decade of terror, simply disappeared. The years turned into decades. The case went cold. DNA technology emerged, linking the crimes in Northern and Southern California and confirming they were the work of one man. But his DNA profile matched no one in the criminal databases. He remained a ghost, a John Doe, in the system. The files gathered dust, but for the victims' families and the surviving victims, the nightmare never ended. They lived with the unanswered questions, the unresolved trauma, and the haunting fear that he was still out there, living a normal life. Investigators never gave up. People like Detective Larry Poole, Contra Costa County's Paul Holes, and Orange County's Larry Poulias, two Larrys dedicated their careers to hunting this monster. They pursued every lead, no matter how cold. And then there were the citizen detectives, people like Michelle McNamara, a true crime writer who became obsessed with the case. She was the one who coined the name Golden State Killer, giving a single, powerful identity to this multifaceted monster. She poured years of her life into investigating, connecting dots that others had missed, and bringing renewed public attention to the case through her blog, True Crime Diary. Tragically, Michelle McNamara passed away in 2016, before she could finish her book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark. But her work was not in vain. Her husband, Patton Oswalt, along with her research partners, finished the book, and its publication in 2018 put the Golden State Killer back in the national spotlight. Just 2 months after the book's release, the impossible happened. The ghost was finally given a face, using a revolutionary new technique involving genetic genealogy. Investigators uploaded the killer's DNA profile to a public ancestry website, GetMatch. They weren't looking for him directly, but for his relatives. By building out a massive family tree, they were able to zero in on a small pool of suspects. On April 24, 2018, police descended on a quiet suburban street in Citrus Heights, a Sacramento suburb right in the heart of where the East Area Rapist began his reign of terror. They arrested a 72-year-old man named Joseph James D'Angelo. He was a former police officer, a veteran, a grandfather. He had been hiding in plain sight for over 40 years. The man who had terrorized a state, who had committed at least 13 murders and over 50 assaults, was a seemingly ordinary-looking old man. Investigators confirmed his identity by matching his DNA from a discarded tissue to the DNA left at the crime scenes decades earlier. It was a perfect match. The chase was finally over. The arrest brought a tidal wave of relief and disbelief. How could this man, who once swore to protect and serve, be capable of such monstrous acts? His life as a cop in Exeter and Auburn in the 1970s directly overlapped with the timelines and locations of the Visalia ransacker and the early East Area Rapist crimes. He had used his knowledge of police procedure to evade capture for decades. In June 2020, Joseph D'Angelo, then 74, was wheeled into a university ballroom, converted into a courtroom to allow for social distancing. To avoid the death penalty, he agreed to plead guilty. Over several days, survivors and family members of his victims finally had the chance to confront him, to speak their pain directly to the man who had shattered their lives. They read victim impact statements, their voices filled with anger, sorrow, and incredible strength. They described the loved ones they lost, the parents, the siblings, the spouses, and the lifetime of fear and trauma they had endured. D'Angelo sat there, seemingly frail and emotionless, listening to the litany of his atrocities. He admitted to 13 murders and 13 kidnapping-related charges, and also confessed to dozens of other crimes for which the statute of limitations had expired. The judge sentenced him to multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. The Golden State Killer would die in prison. The story of the Golden State Killer is a harrowing reminder of the darkness that can hide behind an ordinary face. But it's also a powerful story of persistence, innovation, and the unbreakable spirit of survivors and investigators who refused to let a monster win. For decades, he was a nameless shadow, a ghost story that haunted California. Today, he is just Joseph James D'Angelo, a prisoner, his name forever linked not to power, but to the justice he finally faced. Imagine a town gripped by fear, where the setting sun doesn't bring peace, but a chilling premonition of death. A town where young lovers parked on secluded lanes become targets for a hooded phantom. A killer who vanishes as mysteriously as he appears. This isn't a horror movie script. This was the terrifying reality for the people of Texarkana in 1946. This is the story of the Texarkana Moonlight Murders. Our story begins on a cool February night. Jimmy Hollis and his girlfriend, Mary Jean Larry, were parked on a remote lover's lane. They were just two young people enjoying a quiet moment together. Suddenly, their car door was wrenched open. A man wearing a white sack over his head, with eye holes cut out, blinded them with a flashlight. He ordered them out of the car. What followed was a brutal, terrifying assault. The attacker beat Jimmy severely, leaving him for dead, and then turned his attention to Mary Jean. Miraculously, both of them survived. Mary Jean, thinking fast, managed to escape and run for help, her bare feet pounding the cold, hard ground until she reached a nearby house. When the police arrived, Jimmy was found battered but alive. They had survived, but they were the lucky ones. The Phantom Killer had just made his debut, and his reign of terror had only just begun. Less than a month later, the Phantom struck again, and this time, he would not be so merciful. On March 24th, Richard Griffin and his girlfriend, Polly Ann Moore, were found dead in their parked car. Richard was shot twice in the back of the head, and Polly Ann was found in the back seat, also shot in the head. The community was stunned. The attack on Hollis and Larry had been alarming, but this was different. This was cold-blooded murder. The killer had escalated, and the town of Texarkana was now on high alert. People started locking their doors, buying guns, and avoiding the quiet, secluded roads they once frequented. A shadow of fear had fallen over the Twin Cities, which straddled the Texas-Arkansas border. The killer's audacity grew with each attack. 3 weeks later, on April 14th, the community was rocked by another double murder. 16-year-old Betty Jo Booker and 17-year-old Paul Martin were found dead. Paul's body was discovered by the side of a road, shot 4 times. Betty Jo's body was found nearly 2 miles away, hidden behind a tree. She, too, had been shot twice. What was particularly chilling about this murder was that Betty Jo, a talented saxophone player, had played a gig with her band at the local VFW club earlier that night. Paul had picked her up after the performance. They were just 2 teenagers, full of life and promise, their futures stolen in an instant. The pattern was becoming horrifyingly clear. Young couples, parked in secluded areas, attacked under the cover of darkness. The press dubbed the unknown assailant the Phantom Killer, a name that perfectly captured his ghostly, elusive nature. He was everywhere and nowhere, a faceless monster haunting the moonlight. The town was in a full-blown panic. Businesses closed early. Streets were deserted after dark. People stayed home, huddled behind locked doors and drawn curtains, listening to every creak and rustle outside. The Texas Rangers were called in, led by the legendary MT Lone Wolf Gonzalez, one of the most famous Rangers of his time. Gonzalez set up his headquarters in the Grim Hotel in downtown Texarkana and vowed to catch the killer. The investigation was massive, involving local police, state troopers from both Texas and Arkansas, and the FBI. A huge reward was offered for any information leading to the Phantom's capture. Police patrolled the lovers' lanes, setting up decoys with officers posing as couples, hoping to lure the killer into a trap. But the Phantom was like a ghost. He seemed to know their every move. Then, on the night of May 3rd, the Phantom changed his methods. This time, he didn't target a couple in a car. He broke into a rural farmhouse. Virgil Starks and his wife, Katie, were at home. Virgil was sitting in his armchair reading the newspaper when he was shot twice in the back of the head through a closed window. The sound of shattering glass and gunshots sent Katie, who was in another room, into a state of terror. As she frantically tried to call the police, she was shot twice in the face. Believing her to be dead, the killer fled into the night. But Katie Starks was a fighter. Despite her horrific injuries, she managed to crawl out of her house and make her way to a neighbor for help. She survived, but the attack proved that no one was safe. The Phantom wasn't just targeting lovers' lanes anymore. He was coming into people's homes. This was the last known attack attributed to the Phantom Killer. After the Starks assault, the murders simply stopped. The fear, however, lingered for years. The summer of 1946 in Texarkana was known as the Summer of Fear. The case became one of America's most famous unsolved mysteries. The investigation was exhaustive. Hundreds of suspects were questioned, and dozens of leads were followed. But every trail went cold. No one was ever convicted of the Moonlight murders. The prime suspect, and the one most investigators and researchers believe was the Phantom, was a man named Yoel Swinney. Swinney was a small-time car thief and counterfeiter with a long criminal record. His wife, Peggy, confessed to the police that her husband was the Phantom Killer. She gave a detailed account of the murders, describing how he forced her to wait in the car while he committed the crimes. Her story matched many of the details of the crime scenes that had not been released to the public. However, her testimony was considered inadmissible in court because, under Texas law at the time, a wife could not be forced to testify against her husband. Without her testimony, the prosecutors felt they didn't have enough evidence to secure a conviction for murder. Swinney was instead sent to prison on a life sentence for being a habitual offender due to his history of car theft. He was released in 1973 and always maintained his innocence regarding the murders until his death in 1994. Was Yoel Swinney the Phantom? His wife's confession is compelling, but without a trial and a conviction, we can never be certain. Over the decades, other theories have emerged. Some believe the killer was a local man who left town after the final attack. Others have suggested multiple killers were involved, or even that some of the murders were unrelated copycat crimes. The mystery has captivated amateur detectives and true crime enthusiasts for generations. The case inspired the classic 1976 horror film, The Town That Dreaded Sundown, which brought the chilling story to a national audience, cementing its place in popular culture. The Texarkana Moonlight murders left a deep scar on the community. It changed the town forever. The sense of safety and innocence was shattered. Even today, the story is passed down through generations. A local legend that serves as a chilling reminder of that terrifying spring when a hooded phantom haunted the night. The victims, Jimmy Hollis, Mary Jean Larry, Richard Griffin, Polly Ann Moore, Betty Jo Booker, Paul Martin, Virgil Starks, and Katie Starks, are not just names in a cold case file. They were real people, with families, friends, and dreams for the future. Their stories serve as the tragic heart of this enduring mystery. We may never know for sure who the Phantom Killer was, and perhaps that's the most unsettling part of the story. The monster who terrified a town simply faded back into the darkness, leaving behind only questions, fear, and the ghosts of his victims in the Texarkana moonlight. Have you ever heard of a criminal who was everywhere and nowhere at the same time? For over 15 years, German police were haunted by a ghost, a phantom who left her DNA at dozens of crime scenes, from petty thefts to brutal murders, but could never be found. This is the bizarre, true story of the Phantom of Heilbronn. Our story begins in 1993, in the small German town of Idar-Oberstein. a 62-year-old woman, Lieselotte Schlenger, was found strangled in her apartment. The police collected evidence, including DNA from a teacup. This was the first time they encountered a specific female DNA profile. Let's call it Unknown Female 1. At the time, DNA technology was still in its early days, so they filed the sample away. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of a massive, continent-spanning mystery. Fast forward to 2001, in Freiburg, Germany. A 61-year-old antiques dealer was found strangled in his shop. The crime scene was a mess, but among the evidence, investigators found the exact same DNA profile, Unknown Female 1. The ghost had struck again, 8 years later. The police were baffled. What was the connection between an elderly woman and an antiques dealer, murdered years apart in different cities? They had no leads, no witnesses, just a genetic fingerprint of a killer who seemed to vanish into thin air. The Phantom's crime spree then began to accelerate. Her DNA started popping up everywhere. It was found on a syringe containing heroin in a German forest. It was found on a discarded cookie at the scene of a home invasion in Budenheim. It was found at the scene of a caravan theft. The range of crimes was bewildering. Was this person a drug user, a petty thief, a cold-blooded killer? The profile didn't fit any single type of criminal. The police were under immense pressure. They created a profile of this mystery woman. She was likely of Eastern European descent, a drifter, perhaps working with a criminal gang. They offered a massive reward, up to 300,000 euros, for any information leading to her capture. The media dubbed her the Phantom of Heilbronn, after her DNA was found at the most high-profile case yet. The murder of a 22-year-old police officer named Misiali Kisuita on April 25, 2007, in Heilbronn. Kisuita and her partner were on their lunch break in their patrol car when they were ambushed. 2 gunmen approached and shot both officers in the head at point-blank range. Kisuita died instantly. Her partner was critically injured but miraculously survived, though with no memory of the attack. It was a brazen, professional hit. Investigators scoured the patrol car for evidence, and, to their astonishment, they found it, the Phantom's DNA, right there on the back seat. This changed everything. The case was no longer about petty crimes or isolated murders. This was an attack on the state itself. The Phantom was now Germany's most wanted woman, a woman without a face. The investigation went into overdrive. A special task force of over 100 officers was assigned to the case. They spent years and thousands of hours chasing this ghost. They followed leads across Europe, interviewing hundreds of potential suspects, running DNA tests on thousands of women. But every lead was a dead end. Every suspect was cleared. The Phantom remained a ghost. The list of her alleged crimes grew longer and more bizarre. Her DNA was found in Austria at the scene of multiple home invasions. It was found in France on a bullet from a brawl between rival biker gangs. It was even found on the steering wheel of a car belonging to a male asylum seeker who had been found drowned. This last case was particularly strange. How could this woman be involved in so many different, seemingly unrelated crimes across 3 countries? Was she a master of disguise, the leader of an international crime syndicate? The speculation was wild. Police drew up composite sketches based on witness descriptions from various crime scenes, but the descriptions were all different. Some said she looked like a man, others said she was definitively female. The task force was chasing a shadow. They had invested over 15,000 overtime hours and millions of euros into the hunt, all for nothing. The public was on edge, and the police were looking increasingly helpless. Then, in 2009, the entire investigation came crashing down because of a completely unrelated case. French authorities were investigating the burnt body of a male asylum seeker. As part of their routine checks, they tried to run a DNA test on a fingerprint sample he had provided years earlier, but the test failed. When they investigated why, they discovered that the cotton swabs they had been using for DNA collection were contaminated. This sparked a terrifying thought in the minds of the German investigators. Could it be they had been using cotton swabs from the same company for all their crime scene collections? They immediately ran tests. They took a brand new, unopened cotton swab from the factory, tested it for DNA, and there it was, the genetic profile of unknown female one, the Phantom of Heilbronn. The entire 15-year manhunt, the massive reward, the international investigation, it was all a colossal mistake. The Phantom wasn't a criminal mastermind. She was a factory worker in Bavaria who packed cotton swabs for a living. Her DNA had been contaminating the swabs before they were even packaged and sent out to police departments across Europe. The revelation was a huge embarrassment for the police forces in Germany, France, and Austria. The woman without a face had never been to a single crime scene. She was just an innocent woman going to work every day, completely unaware that she was the subject of one of the largest manhunts in European history. The police had to officially close the case of the Phantom of Heilbronn. All the crimes she was linked to had to be reinvestigated from scratch. The murder of police officer Michali Kisuita was eventually solved and attributed to a neo-Nazi terrorist group. The other murders and crimes remained unsolved or were re-examined without the Phantom lead. The story of the Phantom of Heilbronn is a stark reminder of how easily things can go wrong. Even with the most advanced technology, it shows how an over-reliance on a single piece of evidence, without considering every possibility, can lead investigators down a rabbit hole for more than a decade. It is a case that is now taught in forensics schools as a cautionary tale about the importance of checking every detail, right down to the humble cotton swab. It's a truly mind-bending story, isn't it? A ghost who haunted Europe for years, only to be revealed as a factory error. What do you think about this incredible case? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the strangest true crime cases. See you next time.